As said, I'm Ginger Bryant. I am the Executive Director of the Cannabis Beverage Association. We are a California-based nonprofit trade association, and we're specifically formed to represent the interests of this amazing industry, cannabis beverages. So as my guest today, we've had a series of mix-ups, but as I've been assured that this is standard protocol in the cannabis industry here. So I'd like to introduce our board president, our marketing director, and our Sacramento-based advocate, and they'll introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves here. So, Aaron.
Hi there. I am Aaron Silverstein. I currently serve as the president of the Cannabis Beverage Association, as well as my other job I seem to do in my part-time. I don't really know what or how I have time for it, but I'm also heading up the production at House of Saka, a cannabis-infused wine company.
I'm Jim Baudino. Been in the cannabis industry about 7 years now. And I work with Sands Lane Ventures, so I'm a partner in Sands Lane. And we're on the board of the Cannabis Beverage Association, and I also head up the marketing committee.
Yeah, hi, I am David Quintana. I am the lobbyist based in Sacramento. My firm is called Resolute. We have a very, very broad-based, and this is my cannabis client of choice that I choose to work with. And I've been doing this since the beginning of the association. There would be a legislator to my left, and I would like to introduce him, Carlos Villapadua from Stockton. He was going to come and testify a little bit, or talk to you guys about what's going on with our sector in the legislature. He got here last night, checked into his hotel, went down the freeway to get something to eat. He ended up in Oakland and came out, and his car was busted, and they stole his laptop. So he is not here today. I told him, dude, you don't have to go to Oakland to eat. They have delivery, but whatever. So he's not here, and so you have us. Thank you.
All right. So David is actually one of the founders of the CBA, along with these other two, and they'll tell you about their involvement here. But let me tell you about what we were doing. So I was brought on. I have a lot of experience with organizational development, capacity building, things like that. So helping this group of amazingly talented entrepreneurs. How do we get organized, set this nonprofit up, and get you going as a trade association? And so that's been my task, and it has been extremely exciting and a ton of fun. So if you can say that about your job, you're in a good spot.
Herding cats, though.
So we, when defining who we are, how do you put the defined beverage? So we define it as the emulsions and the manufacturing distribution and the intellectual property and brands. So that is how we are defining and focusing on what's involved in the beverage industry. When we work to help advocate for all the different things that mean something to the beverage industry, we have committees that do work. We have committees that do advocacy and government affairs. We have committees that are working on developing standardization processes, working with the DCC in Sacramento. We have committees that are working on education, and we are also working on how we can build all this together so that we're not siloed and have a united message. So you can see we're kind of busy right now. So with that, as I said, people with good ideas somehow find each other. And that's how this organization started to pull together. So David, I'm going to push this over to you.
Yeah.
As one of the idea people, do you want to talk about how this all came together when you were working with Makai?
Yeah, and I think Makai, does anybody here know Makai Polanski? Makai is really a very brilliant guy. He reminds me a lot of myself. Not that I'm brilliant, but let me pull that back in. I have good ideas, and then I need people to help me carry those ideas out. So Makai always has really good ideas. So I had worked with Makai when I was as a lobbyist when he was doing delivery and they didn't have a license. And Mackay came to me and said, we have a problem. Delivery doesn't have a license. This was when they were first doing the legislation. And so we created an organization, and then we lobbied, and we got licensed. So delivery now has a license. And that was Mackay and the association he put together. So Mackay came to me a couple of years later, about 4 years ago, and said, hey, I'm getting into beverage. I think it's going to be a big deal. I've looked at the legislation, and beverage isn't anything. Like, there's nothing about beverage in there. Maybe we should start an association. And I was like, yeah. So I did my research, and we put it together. Then I dropped the ball, and so it lay dormant for about 6 months. And then I sent an apology email and groveled, said, I'm sorry, man, I dropped the ball, but that's what I am. And so we got back together. Mackay and I met at a hot dog place. We decided to throw the organization back together. He reached out to very, very good industry folks like Aaron and Jim, and we've been moving ever since. November 2019, we put it together, and it'll be 2 years in November. So that's how it's
November.
November.
Happy birthday, man! So that's how it came together. Let me say this, and I don't know if this is my part to say, but what's amazing, and I think all of you should know because you're involved in the beverage space, even legislators that I know that get high as fuck don't know about beverage. So we have calls, right? And I know that legislator, right? I know him. And he'll be on the call and they're like, hey, do you know beverage? He's like, what's that? Like, beer? So they don't know beverage even exists. And that's what we're here for. We're here to change them. So we had about 40 calls with legislators this year and educated them. We have samples from some of our great members. We give samples out to them and to their staffers. So I think what we have done is we have done a great job at moving your ball forward so that the people that make decisions and write laws about cannabis now know that they need to think about beverage too. And we can talk about some of the problems that happened when they weren't thinking about beverage. But yeah, so that was me.
We'll just let David talk.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to my board president and my marketing director here and talk about, so you guys each comment on this. As founders of this organization, you've been here since day one, along with David. So from your perspective, what drove you to create a trade association? And what made you realize that this was something you should jump on early on?
Well, for me personally, before I joined the cannabis industry, I was actually in the wine industry, working in the non-alcoholic wine sector. And when cannabis beverages first there was real interest in them really blowing up, I would say 3 years ago, where people were developing new brands, trying to get things on the market. And I was working with a number of different people trying to launch products in this space to help them create non-alcoholic wines they were going to use as bases to infuse. But the struggles that I saw these people go through in terms of just trying to figure out how to put together a package that was going to be compliant, figuring out what kind of bottling they could do, where they could bottle something that was going to be compliant, how to deal with the licensing system. When beverages, if you guys are in the beverage industry, it takes a lot of expensive equipment, as well as, skills that it's not quite the same as just packaging flour. So seeing all those struggles in the industry and things that we could do to change it through Sacramento, it became amazingly appealing. And when Mackay, as David was mentioning earlier, reached out to me to try and be a part of this organization, I kind of just fell in head first. Haven't looked back since.
So I had a little bit different background. I came from the auto industry, so spent 10 years at Toyota corporate, and then came into cannabis through the media side, so working with Snoop Dogg's media companies. I helped run that for a number of years, but I had a chance to see all the brands coming into the space. It's like with OG, Kenny Morrison, with Venice Cookie Company, and Keef. So you had a very few beverage brands. But then over the years, you started seeing more branding, just the quality of products. I think that was one of the issues early days. It just all tastes too much like weed, so you couldn't hit that mainstream audience. But I started working a lot in Canada. So I worked a lot with Canopy Growth and some others, but then you see the Constellation come in. And so now everyone's ears perk up, say, something's going on. And so when you start thinking bigger picture about, well, where do I get beverages now? And where's the alcohol industry? And that's where you see the opportunities. And everyone's looking, and that's why you get all the Molsons and all these major Budweisers and looking at the space and Pepsis, and because they see what's going to happen when you go into a grocery store, convenience store, gas station, beverages. So everyone here sees that opportunity. It's just now, what are those milestones to get there? And do you have enough runway to do it? So with Sands Lane, we've got a brand incubator and also agency, marketing and branding agency. So we work with a lot of brands, and we do a lot of focus on cannabis beverages, just because we know what that future entails and how do you do it, but in a cost-effective way, and knowing the right partners within the industry. And that's why the Cannabis Beverage Association is so important in being involved now. You're writing the regulations that are going to be our future. And so partnering up with this guy, extremely important, because you are setting the standards. So what you were saying, one of our brands, that's first beverage brand that some of these regulars have tasted, it was our brand. That's going to leave an everlasting impact.
Yeah. I think so. What Jim's referring to is that what I do is I'll have legislators and their staffers over to my offices, and then I'll just break out one of the brands. Like you have that Malice Green Apple, Granny Smith.
Granny Smith, OG.
And so I'll give it to let the staffers taste it, and they've never tasted beverage before, and they expect it to taste like bong water. And then they taste this Granny Smith, and they're like, Jesus, this is it? Like, why am I doing edibles, man? Why am I doing this? And so they become hooked on the product. And so what we want to do, as you said, is that's all nothing but a setup, so that when we see legislation that comes through later, and we start saying, hey, this doesn't work for beverage, they're like, oh yeah, beverage, I love that stuff. So,
Can you tell we're having a good time? We're working hard, but it's a good time. So, David, you've touched on this a little bit. How many members of the legislature now do you think are aware of this, other than the calls? Do you think that beverage is recognized in the Capitol?
Yeah, not as it's an ongoing battle, and obviously legislators come and go. But as I mentioned before, we had 30 to 50 calls. I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere between 30 to 50 Zoom calls with legislators. I've had probably about 20 to my office. Then I've had a number of staff. But one thing we did last year, and I think you're going to cover this a little bit, but I'll touch on it now, is we had a bill on your behalf. We had AB 1222, and what that did is, I don't know if many of you are in California, but this year, actually, still, if you are manufacturing any sort of glass bottle, it has to be painted, right, or brown, correct, which is hard to source. So we ran a bill this year with Assemblyman Phil Chen out of LA, and what it said is that's goofy. What you can do is you can have any color glass bottle. So any color bottle now, because of AB 1222, which was signed into law by the governor as of January 1st, you don't have to go and try and source a brown bottle. You don't have to you don't have to paint your bottle. You can have any color glass bottle. What we will need to do with this year is we'll have to have cleanup legislation, because we do realize some people have plastic containers. And so we'll have to do that for plastic containers too. So you can have any color plastic container, and you won't have to continue to source these crazy things. But that's an example of what happens when people don't know about beverage and they're writing law. So that's our job, right? Our job is to make sure they know beverage, so when they're writing it, they're like, oh, hold it a second, how does this affect the beverage guys? So
I have to say, though, David makes it sound so simple.
Right,
but
exactly.
Really, it's almost impressive. What you do is impressive, too, for us, especially. But that took, just getting something that simple, something you would probably think is so absolutely basic. Why do I need to have opaque painted bottles or ceramic bottles instead of just transparent or green glass? That probably took us, 30 to 40 meetings with different legislators
probably
to
30
actually
to 40
get
meetings,
that going?
Testimony, yeah. And that's, again, that's one example of what we did this year. But for those of you who are members, you might already be members of the CBA, but we'll be doing more things this year, such as the cleanup bill. But those are things that you might want to get involved in and say, hey, you know what, here's a problem that I've noticed, and bring it up to the Leg Committee, and we'll go, hey, XYZ company said this. Yep. So that is an advantage for you.
One of the other things that David helps us with, and all of our members go and give real-life working examples, which just makes all the difference. We're not talking about theory here. We have people that are producing products that are working up against these impediments, regulatory or market access or whatever it is, that is keeping them from getting, if you're here in California and you start to tell a legislature that this is anti-business, all of a sudden they go, hold on, no, we don't speak that language here. Let's talk about how we can help you get where you need to be to get your product to market. We are pro-cannabis. So working with, it's not just with the legislature, but it's also working policy within the administration. And so we are for example, conversations with the California Department of Food and Ag on, what is making sure beverages are made with California grown cannabis, and then making sure that tracks all the way through the system. When we're talking with CDFA, they are so interested in not only establishing standards for California, but also they're getting ready to open this up for when it goes nationwide. And this is we're finding this in every state agency. So it's a receptive group, but it is not to understate just how tangled this is and how much effort it takes in minutiae attention to detail. So one of the first things that we just did in order to be able to establish a platform is we have been working with the DCC to establish beverage as its own category. That's a policy thing. That's not David. David sets up all the meetings. He talks to people. We get the materials. We work in tandem, obviously. So there's both policy work and legislative work that goes into this that is involved in our government affairs initiatives. So, and then we just chase after David. That's clear.
And that seems like a no-brainer that beverage should be separate. But a lot of people don't realize how it's been bucketed under edibles.
Edibles, that's right.
And so there's a lot of work that goes into it. So a lot of people just think it's so simple, but
it's there are so many things unique to beverage that don't apply under the edible category. But when we talk to the DCC, who are doing amazing work, by the way, if you're tracking how in the last 100 days they've done all the consolidation and things that they've been doing, but they are truly drinking out of a fire hose. This industry is so far ahead with what they can catch up with. And so when you come to them with informed, reasonable arguments, and based on what your experiences are in the market, I can tell you that they've been very receptive to us. And that's where we plan to keep ourselves right in front of them as we move this agenda forward. So back to Aaron here and to Jim. Can you talk about, from your perspective in representing your brands and then Jim representing all the other brands that are involved in the CBA, what was the meaning of when we passed the bill? What does it mean to you when AB 1222 was passed?
I mean, to start, for me, it was a really critical point for us because it just demonstrated just the start of what we could do. It was something where we tried to take a really, really small bite out of the change that we needed, going, just one step at a time. But getting 40 different legislators to actually know what cannabis beverages are, to care about it, and to start moving forward on something, it's only going to grow from there. It's an amazing kind of start, and one of the things I know we're working hard to do is continue to build our membership base and grow this organization, because part of what everyone's looking to hear as we do that is, who do we represent? Are we all of the voices in the cannabis beverage sector? And it's something right now that's definitely how the legislature feels, and it's something we're continuing to grow. But yeah, that was just a pivotal and immense first step.
And it helped out your brand a little bit.
It certainly did help.
Yes, with the House of Saka. It brought legitimacy to what we're doing and all the effort, because we're volunteers. Actually, we pay to do this. So,
for the privilege.
Yeah, pay for the privilege. But we see what's going to happen in the future, and bringing legitimacy to all the work that we've done and all the work David's done and his team. And so it was a big win, and just knowing the effort that Aaron was mentioning, how long this process takes just for minutia changes in policy, and how important one little change in verbiage can be. And so it definitely a lot of credibility to what we're doing.
So, David, to you, there's a lot of cannabis groups working in the Capitol, and you were able to form some strategic alliances this year with us. How do you think other industry groups are going to be working with us next year? And you want to talk about the experience of teaming up and helping each other?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with other groups on, as you all know, there was a very large bill on hemp passed this year, and we worked with Caliva. Really was very, very active. I don't know if anyone's from Caliva is in the room, but they were they had a heroic effort in getting that bill passed. So we worked closely with them. Also, of course, the CCIA. I think what the bill did was the bill put us on the map as a group of a discrete type of business, which is beverage. And now people will come to us to say, hey, how does this affect beverage? And that's what you want. You want people to go, did you talk to the CBA? Where are they at on this issue? And that's now happening. And that's what you want to be. That's where you want to be in the Capitol. You want to be on the top of mind of people when they're thinking of ideas that touch your industry. You want them to touch you. And then what you want is for us to reach out to folks like you and go, hey, Senator Smith is thinking of doing this bill. Do any of you have concerns with this? Does this affect with any of your business plans? So that's kind of how the machine works. And I think that's where we're at now. We're an adult.
Thanks, David. So, Aaron, you have a lot of, besides being heavily involved in the industry, you are aware of many other groups out there. Why did you choose to get involved with the CBA of all the different choices you could have made?
The CBA is really the first group I'm aware of to care about beverages within cannabis and really go after that. There are, I believe there's one other group right now in the country, Attach, that is also trying to do that and working on a slightly different level. I know they're going for some national kind of advocacy. But 2 years ago when we started, the CBA was it, and it was the first. And I think we're addressing issues on micro scale is kind of the wrong word, but it's those small things that can trip up an entire category for sure if no one's looking out for them. And right now we're the only people I'm aware of doing that.
So if I can add on to that. Right, so it's the little things about beverage that when people don't even understand that beverage exists as its own category, and instead they throw us in with edibles, there are a lot of little things that affect you as the producer or the retailer of beverage that they never consider. So for example, and I brought some props around, one of the things I think that we need to think about in the future, and we're not saying we're doing this now, but it's just an example of when you throw us into edibles, this is the kind of stuff that happens. So I think a lot of you are familiar, 2 milligrams, three, sorry, man, whoa, 3 milligrams, 3 milligrams, but you have this, this XO, and it's a little complex. Actually, I gave one of these to my wife. No, I gave her a can a couple years ago. She didn't open it for like 9 months because she looked at that. She's like, oh, fuck, I don't want to deal with that. And it sat in the laundry room for 9 months, right? Meanwhile, it's 3 milligrams, right? I went to a liquor store. I got 100 proof Rumple Mix, $12.79, and that's it, right? There needs to be some sort of freaking equity between a 3 milligram can of, oh, God damn. I smell like that alley. Anyway, but you know where I'm going here, right? 100 proof of Rumple Mints. It took me 1 second with a twist. Here I have a minimal 3 milligrams of THC, and people like my wife are like, I don't even want to fucking deal with that. So we need to think about how we can create, as we're moving forward with this discrete industry sector, we can get some equity on issues like this. And by the way, I don't drink, so if anybody wants some Rumple Mints, it's all yours, man.
Okay, so, all right, to follow that up, Jim, you want to talk about, after your 7 years in the industry, why did the CBA catch yours and Sandlane's interest? You guys have a broad diversity in your portfolio. What caused you to light up on this one?
Obviously, because of beverage is so important, and to be involved early on, then we can help set the direction and hopefully establish ourselves as more of those industry leaders in beverage, and from branding and marketing and just meeting everyone. And that was the wonderful thing about events, and MJ Unpacked, I know, is in the house. First time I saw and met anyone in person was actually in Vegas.
We've been virtual since we started this thing.
But just the opportunities have been mentioned already, just within beverage, but starting early and knowing where we're going and how do you get there.
Actually, Jim, I have to ask you, because I'd love to hear this. So, coming from cannabis, you've got more experience in it than anyone else on the stage, at least. What made you believe in beverage specifically?
How many people drink alcohol? And I think someone brought it up, I think it was Rick from Tinley, was saying, what's the first question when you go into pretty much any establishment? What do they ask you? What do you want to drink? What can I get you to drink? Wherever you go, whether it's a social setting, you're at someone's house, what can I get you to drink? They don't ask, what can I get you to smoke? I mean, that is powerful. Wherever you go, whatever establishment you go into, grocery store, convenience store, there's rows and rows of beverages.
No, I agree with you there.
All right, so we have a final question about where we're growing. Obviously, here in California, we're setting ourselves up, and we're making a name for ourselves representing this industry that is just, every day when I talk with these guys and all of our board, something new and interesting is happening. So it's obviously a very exciting place to be, but it's also catching attention across the country, and we've started to get some members from across the country as well. So across to everybody, what do you think this means? You know, we're a California-based firm, but what does it mean to have the CBA grow across the country? So Aaron, why don't you start with that?
That is a great question. What it means to grow across the country sounds kind of just like a lot more work to me, but something that we really need, without a doubt. Because I think, at least the way we look at this, you know, the current state of things where you're only focused on that single market in a single state, or you're trying to branch out into another state through, you know, it's like running a completely separate business right now. You're going to have a whole licensing structure and deals with a brand new manufacturer, different sales team, all of that every time you go into a new state. But we know eventually you're going to have federal legalization, you're going to have interstate commerce. And I think one of the most important and valuable things we can do is get ahead of that and kind of pave the way for beverages to go through interstate commerce, and how that's going to work, and make that a smooth transition that happens as soon as possible. And I think going national in that way, having members in every single state where cannabis is legal and being able to speak to those needs is something that's just immensely important to bring this category forward. Because it's going to get there. It's just a question of how fast. And it's something that we can do for all the stakeholders in this space to make that a smooth and quicker transition than it otherwise would be without kind of that voice, whether on a national level or on a state level.
Jim?
That, and it's nice when you have like Georgia and New York and Illinois represented. You're getting a lot of the nuances also in the regulations and policy, and we can come together and either commiserate or celebrate some of the things we're able to do. And I think that's where, when people are coming and asking, like, oh, do you have any manufacturers? And is there competition? It's very much healthy collaboration within the space. And so the more members that we can have in each of the subsegments, I think that's really just going to help us as an industry grow. And so when you get people from different states and regions, it's only beneficial to our end product and pushing beverage forward.
David?
Yeah, well, when I hear the way you put it, it reminds me of, this is exactly why we created the organization. Mm-hmm. If you notice, it's not the California Cannabis Beverage Association, it's the Cannabis Beverage, and we did that on purpose when we created it, because we did want it to become a national advocacy group, and there are two reasons why. One is because we believe that California is an alpha state, not just as a state government and what they do, other people lead, but we are an alpha state in the sense of this industry. California leads the nation in this industry, writ large, not our sector, but writ large, the cannabis industry. And so as we move, as we create the regulations and the templates here in California, we can go ahead and move that across the United States, to the benefit of the companies that are formed out here in California. So that's, when you say that, that's why we did this.
Thank you. Well, and we have just like 3 minutes for any questions you may have, but check us out. We're at cannabisbeverageassociation.org. And we have a table inside, and you can join us at any time. We'd love to have you become involved in any of our committees, any of the other work. As David mentioned, when we're working legislatively, we need to hear from all of you. What does this mean to you? Real life examples of how this is impacting your business are very valuable to us. Any questions? Yes?
Did the association have a position on AB 45, the hemp bill that just got signed?
We did. We supported AB 45. While there's, I know, a lot in that necessarily wasn't always written out in terms of how that was going to then impact the cannabis industry, I think a lot of just what is not necessarily so strictly defined, but the idea of just increasing access and openness in general to whether it is cannabis or hemp is something that we do support.
Well, does the association have a position on legislation or just policy relative to artificial or synthetically derived cannabinoids into beverage versus natural?
I might have some personal opinions, but I don't think that we have necessarily defined that yet as an association. And that is, again, what Ginger was saying of, please become a member and we'd like to hear your voice because we want to hear the entire industry. Right. And how do you all feel about that issue? And then we want to formalize that into a stance so that when this does come up, in terms of any other potential legislation that's coming through, or if it's something we're going to tackle on our own, that we can voice your opinion and support what the industry needs.
Thank you for your time.